In the heart of London is the Court of Appeal.
Court rise.
One of the highest courts in the land, where those already found guilty come to try to prove their innocence. This is the court that overturned the verdicts in some of Britain's most notorious cases, from the Birmingham 6 to the Guildford 4. Now we have been granted unprecedented access to follow stories of ordinary families who have staked everything on a final appeal. Today, a mum whose child was convicted of murder fights for his freedom.
Think about it every day, Joseph walking free.
While the victim's mother fights to keep that same child in prison.
They've done wrong. They should stay where they are. They're just evil.
This court gives convicted criminals one final chance to clear their name.
I believe I'm an innocent man, I'm not a killer.
But for the victims of these crimes, appeals can reopen old wounds.
I just want to touch him again, and cuddle him, and smell him.
Fighting the cases out on their clients' behalf in this hallowed arena are some of the country's most eminent barristers.
I've always been told that I will fight and I won't stop. I am strangely persuasive.
With access inside the courtrooms,
this is a shocking case, isn't it?
It is a shocking case.
Cameras filming behind the scenes for the first time.
So I just really want to raise our glass to the great British justice system. They've really served us well. Would we all agree?
And exclusive access to both sides of each case. This film follows the human stories behind the courtroom drama, right up to the final verdicts.
Court rise.
This is it. This is it good news, or this is it bad news.
In Liverpool, a mother, Carmel, is fighting to free her teenage son from prison. Convicted of murder aged 14, Joseph McGill is serving a life sentence for a crime that she says he didn't commit.
They have a free paper that they have on the bus, and I picked her up and looked at it. It was this size, maybe a little bit bigger, labelled babyface murderer.
Just a few streets away lives the mother of his victim, Sean McHugh.
I would describe Sean as one of the best. Always polite to people, and he had a heart of gold. I've left Sean down there, and when I go, we go together. If I buried him, he's gone forever. But while he's there, I know where he is. No one can hurt him again, can they? Just kill him.
Our cameras are following both mothers behind the scenes as they come to the Court of Appeal for the first time. Meeting with Carmel in a private room is her son's lawyer, Shauneen Lamb.
So it's your first time being in the Royal Court of Justice?
Yes.
Do you find it scary?
Petrifying.
Just across the corridor in the victim's room is Sean McHugh's mother, Lorraine, with the detective that caught Sean's killers.
They've done wrong. They should stay where they are. Each one had a part in his killer.
I said, listen, we know it's going to be upsetting today, but we'll get you through it.
It has taken 3 years to reach the Court of Appeal, but Shauneen always thought Carmel had a compelling case. As legal aid was given in the original trial, this meant under rules, the appeal was entitled to some funding. McGill's lawyers also waived much of their fee.
She'd felt that it was deeply unfair that her son had been convicted of murder for an offence that, although he'd been involved in, he had left the scene before the knife that stabbed the victim was brought in. It's very hard to understand how you can be convicted of murder when you weren't even there when the killing took place.
For more than a century, this has been the final stop for criminals trying to prove their conviction wasn't correct, that something went wrong at their trial, or a legal mistake was made. In the bowels of the building is the robing room, where the barristers prepare for their stage entrance.
You know there are special wig boxes. This is my sandwich box.
Henry Blaxland, QC, is about to argue Joseph McGill's appeal against his murder conviction.
And there is a lot of adrenaline involved in these experiences.
All rise.
He must convince 3 of the most senior judges in the country that Joseph McGill was wrongly convicted of murder.
I'm sorry it's so hot in here. Unfortunately, if the windows are opened, those sitting in Council's Row will get very wet. Sprackland, yeah.
Can I just start with the question of the facts of the case?
In September 2013, 19-year-old Sean McHugh was murdered in a Liverpool laundrette by a gang of teenage boys.
This all started with Sean McHugh deciding to go to the Liver laundrette to do his and his girlfriend's washing.
He needed to go and get his clothes washed. And I always think to myself, if he'd have come to me that day, I would have done the washing.
Put the washing on, then they realised how long the washing cycle takes. I thought, well, we've got some time to spare.
And you see Sean's pink bucket sitting on the machine, and he said to the lady in the laundry, "Can you watch my machines while I go to the shop?" And he went to the shop, then bumped into Joseph McGill coming out the shop. And as they turned, called for other people.
That gang then decided, some already armed with weapons, to chase and ultimately attack Sean in the laundrette.
The Crown's case against Joe McGill was that he was part of the group that had pursued Sean McHugh, that he was a member of a group or a gang called the Laneheads.
You know, they call themselves the Laneheads because they came from the Townsend Lane area of Anfield. That was their territory.
They had access to weapons which were kept in a local park.
I've got a picture of them with their little gang. Sean ran into the laundrette and into the rear room, barricaded himself in.
Sean McHugh was chased and cornered by the gang. He remained holed up in the back room for over 5 minutes.
Making the case to keep Joseph McGill in prison, Barrister Nick Johnson reminds the judges that this group of boys appeared to have murder on their minds.
Threats to kill him were issued. It's the "we are going to kill you."
As the group try to get to Sean McHugh in the back room of the laundrette, Joseph McGill can be clearly seen on the security cameras.
Joseph McGill is in the laundrette. At one point, and this was an important point relied upon by the Crown, he poured some detergent in the immediate vicinity of the door which led to the back room to which Sean McHugh had fled.
Yep.
That was relied on specifically as the act of assistance that he played.
But he had nothing to do with it, that's what he's saying. So why was he putting that detergent under the door so Sean would slip?
You see the group start running across to the Liver laundrette. You know, you could describe them as a pack hunting somebody down.
Emergency. Can you please to the Liver laundrette on Priory Road? Someone's just run in and locked the doors in the office and there's someone outside in the shop hall. Kicking the door in.
There was a man who'd gone into the laundrette. He tried to stop them.
The door was being battered. I thought my presence there alone might just deter them, but it didn't. They were just kids. Just kids.
For the prosecution, Nick Johnson QC argues that the 5 boys convicted all played a role in the attack.
The back was blocked and watched. Each of these applicants either played a part in attacking the door, issuing threats, or clearly encouraging the others.
How many people have come in kicking the door? I don't know. Someone's just run in here and he's put me in now. case, any weapons at all? Pardon? Any weapons seen at all?
The laundrette staff couldn't see, but one of the gang was armed with a knife, and others had run away to get more weapons.
Eventually the door went through. They all piled in. We went through the back, and Sean was in the alleyway, lying down, bleeding very badly.
When he went to the back, he seen Sean.
I said, "What's your name?" He said, "It's Sean. Keep talking. You know, the ambulance is on its way. You're going to be all right." Just reassure him. And I held his hand as well. We were just waiting, basically, till the ambulance came.
And then he said, "Tell me, Mum, I'll be all right." He collapsed and he just bled to death there.
Oh, stop it.
This is the actual murder weapon. So this is the ornamental sword that was used to cause the fatal stab wound to Sean McHugh, severing his femoral artery.
Why this is so important, we have to have regard to the fact that someone was killed. And when these appeals come on, everyone knows it causes very considerable distress to the victims concerned. And therefore it is only fair that all these issues are looked into in detail.
Who killed Sean?
I'll never know that, will we? All I know, 5 were in the laundress at the time, pushing the door in. Each one took part in some part of Sean's killing.
5 boys that went into the back room of the laundrette, where Sean McHugh was killed, were all convicted of murder.
Joseph stood in that room for 8 seconds.
Eight seconds. We don't know what's happened in that 8 seconds, do we? We need to be straight.
I didn't stab him. There you go. So I shouldn't be here. Why don't you just go and look for the weapon, yeah, and then get the prints off that and arrest them instead of arresting people that didn't even stab no one?
Okay.
You see him leave before the murder weapon gets brought in. He didn't kill anyone.
Joseph McGill may not have been in the room when Sean McHugh was killed, but he was convicted of murder under the law of joint enterprise, which allows all members of a group to go down for the same offence.
Did he deliver that blow? No, he didn't. Was he part of that group who had the weapons, who chased Sean, who tried to kick down the door? When they did kick down the door, he ran in, and we know what then happened in that rear room. McGill is one of the ones, he ran out. The law as it was at the time, does that make him any less guilty than the others? Well, that was why he was found guilty.
But the law on joint enterprise was recently changed. Now the prosecution must show that all members of the group shared the same intent. Joseph McGill's appeal argues he did not share that intent to seriously harm Sean, so would not have been convicted of murder under the new law.
The jury was directed that he was guilty as part of the joint enterprise. He was part of, for example, of the gang.
This group of lads, we say, habitually hung round with a ready cache of weapons. And in those circumstances, it defies common sense that anyone who was involved in the gang did not share the intention of the person who inflicted the fatal wound.
We would suggest that under the new law, he would have been acquitted because the prosecution would not have been able to prove that he had that full intent.
Joseph didn't deserve to be convicted of murder.
Barrister Henry Blaxland has 2 days to convince the judges that Joseph McGill was wrongly convicted, while others maintain he is a murderer and should stay locked up.
They knew what they were doing that night. They were out to kill somebody. They're just evil. They're born evil.
For 140 years, all kinds of criminal cases have passed through the hallowed courtrooms of the Court of Appeal. Appeals eligible for legal aid cost the taxpayer nearly £3 million a year, but the judgments of this court have rewritten the course of legal history. It was here that Marine A had his conviction for murder overturned, and Barry George's conviction for the murder of Jill Dando was quashed. Most criminal appeals involve prisoners trying to win their freedom. But in a rare case, Darren Jarvis has already served 2 years in prison and is now a free man. He is fighting to prove he should never have gone to jail in the first place.
I believe I'm an innocent man. I believe that justice will prevail in London.
Darren Jarvis is desperate to restore his reputation after being convicted of causing 2 deaths on the road.
If you're involved in an accident where people sadly die, of course your name is blackened. It's inevitable.
I'm not a killer. Yeah, I've dreamt of having this time in the highest court in the country to clear my name. It's a big day in my life.
Full rise.
In the Court of Appeal Criminal Division, the Queen against Darren Jarvis.
In the summer of 2012, Darren Jarvis was found having a fit behind the wheel of his high-powered sports car. He had crashed the car, killing his passenger, an old friend, and in the oncoming car, a father of 2, travelling with his 4-year-old son. His trial and now his appeal revolve around one crucial question that decides his innocence or his guilt.
Did the fit that Mr. Jarvis undoubtedly did suffer cause the collision, or was, as the prosecution say, was that fit a result in the injuries suffered by Mr. Jarvis after and because of the collision?
The partner of the other driver was in no doubt about what caused the crash.
He was just trying to show off. Look, I got a new sport car, so powerful. Let me show you how fast I can go.
A jury agreed, and Darren Jarvis was convicted on 2 counts of causing death by dangerous driving. But now he is appealing, and the process is reopening old wounds.
My children never going to know their dad. He was only young. They're not going to remember him. Sophie was only 1.5. He never is going to be here for her. I just cannot understand why he's doing this to us as a family. I hate him for what he done. For ruining lives. Mine, my children. I hate him even more now because we have to go through everything again from the beginning. Sorry.
Darren Jarvis has spared no expense on his appeal. As he wasn't eligible for legal aid at trial, the rules say he can't get funding for his appeal, so he didn't apply and has paid thousands of pounds himself. He's now hired Michael Woolkind QC, an eminent appeal barrister, to argue his case.
I look at this picture and I think, to an outsider, they're seeing another world. It's my everyday world. I don't wear the wig to bed, but it's my everyday working world.
He's one of the renowned best QCs in the country. Otherwise, I wouldn't be with him.
The legal team are banking on their theory about the fit that, if accepted, could clear Darren Jarvis's name.
We want this Court of Appeal to believe that you were not conscious at the time of the collision. We want to persuade the court that your conviction simply isn't safe.
They now believe they have the evidence to prove that Darren Jarvis could be innocent.
We now seek to present new evidence, scientific evidence, that it is likely, and indeed more than likely, that there was no steering input after the Nissan car left the verge, contradicting the claim that the driver was struggling with the wheel.
For me, it's so obvious. He's guilty. I hope the judges will not go for his lies.
Every year, around 1,500 people try to get their case to the Court of Appeal. All of them have previously been found guilty, and for most it is their last hope of proving their innocence. Few cases make it all the way to a full court hearing, and fewer than 1 in 10 are successful. In 2014, 14-year-old Joseph McGill was convicted of murder for his part in a brutal gang attack. Today, his mother, Carmel, and the victim's mother, Lorraine, are at the Court of Appeal to find out if Joseph McGill's conviction for murder should be overturned.
And he should have been punished for his involvement, but he didn't kill anyone.
He took Sean away, didn't he? Each one had a person with killer.
Henry Blaxland has argued that Joseph McGill did not intend to kill Sean, so should not have been convicted of murder. But to strengthen the appeal, the legal team has added a further point. They say McGill, who was just 13 at the time of the murder, was not given a fair trial.
The complaint in the Joseph McGill case is that the appropriate procedure for trying him as a 14-year-old at the time was not properly considered. Another way of putting it is that he wasn't given his rights in the original trial. This is a case involving a gang. The gang themselves, or a considerable number of them, were sitting together in the dock.
Henry Blaxland argues that by putting Joseph McGill, a 14-year-old who suffered from ADHD, in the dock with the other boys, he was bound to behave badly, and that behaviour would not go down well with the jury.
A young person with ADHD, put in the company of his peer group, is always at risk of behaving in a way which is going to be completely contrary to his own interests. That's the problem here, and that's what happened.
I definitely think that the boys did themselves no favours in the dock.
Judge says he saw Joe McGill throw something to Corey Hewitt.
There were scuffles that broke out.
Kiefer Dijkstra set fire to Hare, racist remarks, and then they began to fight.
But it was making me feel, you've just killed Sean, and you're all sitting laughing.
In your case is, had he been outside the dock, none of this would have ever happened. Yes, these are very, very severe criticisms of trial counsel.
Well, I do criticise everybody, and I make that criticism fairly and squarely.
What we are looking at is whether these children had a fair trial. The answer has to come to no, they didn't have a fair trial.
It appears from what some of the counsel are saying that these were streetwise gang members.
Yes, they were streetwise, but they were children.
Over 3 days, the judges have heard evidence from all sides.
Court rise.
They must now decide whether to reject Joseph McGill's appeal or give him the chance to walk free. Criminals that feel they've been wrongly convicted can come to the Court of Appeal, which has the power to overturn their convictions. But victims can also challenge legal verdicts.
Court rise.
My Lord, this is an application by the Attorney General to this court for a review of the sentences passed.
This is a shocking case, isn't it?
Exactly so, Lord.
Twin sisters Naya and Yayla are trying to increase the punishment given to the man that killed their little brother, Micaiah.
I see him as him. That's what I just remember him as. Like, seeing videos like that, it doesn't make me sad. It makes me laugh, because I think it's really cute, and it just reminds me of him a lot. I was the last person to see him, ever.
Micaiah and the children's aunt, Rosie, were killed by a joyriding driver in August 2016. Joshua Dobbie was sentenced to 12 years in prison, but for Micaiah's sister Yayla, who was also injured in the crash, it wasn't enough.
I wrote a letter to the Prime Minister asking her if she could increase the amount of years you get for death by dangerous driving. And I told her that my 10-year-old brother was killed and my auntie was killed. I don't think the sentences that the man got was enough at all. Whereas he's killed 2 people, he should get a sentencing for each person.
When anyone complains about a low sentence in certain serious crimes, it is reviewed by the Attorney General's office. If the Attorney General agrees the sentence is too lenient, and the complaint was made within 4 weeks, the case is referred to the Court of Appeal.
This is a sentence that was indeed unduly lenient and which should be increased. The Court of Appeal have to consider whether or not this was a serious mistake made by a judge in a sentencing case.
Where the Attorney General thinks a longer sentence is warranted, he will finance the appeal. His office has now employed Mark Haywood QC to convince the judges Joshua Dobbie should serve more time.
The facts of the case are that the offender unlawfully took a car. These officers...
He stole a car?
He stole it, yes. And drove it in a highly dangerous manner. The offender drove so that the vehicle left the carriageway, mounting the pavement at speed.
He was driving it almost like he was drunk. He was going over the speed limit. He was like zigzagging like a madman.
This footage shows the driver, Joshua Dobbie, just days previously, in another police chase in the same stolen car.
And so this car's come round the corner, and then all I hear is this massive bang.
Striking a bollard in a built-up area, causing the vehicle to rise up so that it landed on the members of one family, killing 2, an adult and a child, and injuring 2 other children.
On their way to the park to buy an ice cream?
Exactly so, Lord.
It all happened in a blink of an eye, really. And I think Micaiah must have taken the hardest hit, because I obviously got hit by the front of the car, but he must have got hit before me. I remember seeing the actual man who done it. I was under the car, and I remember him getting out, treading over my head and running.
The driver, Joshua Dobbie, was filmed by a neighbour as he tried to escape the police, leaving 3 children and their aunt trapped under his car.
Fella jumped out, ran away straight away. But that was 5 seconds worth of time, and...
You can never take it back.
No.
10-year-old Micaiah died at the scene. 8 months later, his mother Danielle still hasn't come to terms with his loss.
We haven't touched his bedroom, so it's exactly how he left it on the day he went out. All his little clothes are over the floor. And you can picture him in there, playing on things, laughing and smiling.
Well, at night time, my mum comes in here and she always says, like, good night and blows kisses.
It means he was real. By getting rid of him, you feel like you're getting rid of him, everything to do with him. And then he really is just a memory.
For Micaiah's family, a longer sentence for his killer would allow them a chance to come to terms with their loss.
I want to touch him again, and cuddle him, and smell him. You pray to God, please just bring him back. Let this not have happened. No.
The family must now wait to see what the judges decide. Court of Appeal judges can't be distracted by emotion. They have to focus on the law as it applies to each case that comes before them. But they are aware that for the victims of crime, appeals can bring back painful memories.
Thomas, how do you feel when you're coming here on Daddy's grave? How do you feel?
For Daddy. Sad.
Thomas was in the car when his father was killed in a collision with a dangerous driver.
I always look at Thomas and wonder what's in his head, how that affects him. Thomas, you right? You okay?
Darren Jarvis's appeal means the family must relive painful memories.
In 1 second, my life changed completely, and my children's life. Because of somebody's stupidity, my children never going to know their dad.
At the Court of Appeal, Michael Woolkine QC is preparing to argue his case.
I've always been told that I will fight and I won't stop. I am strangely persuasive.
Today, the judges will decide if Darren Jarvis can clear his name, or if he will remain a convicted killer.
Choice of cufflinks is by chance. It's 3 wise monkeys. Just happened to be ones I chose today.
Court rise.
While in prison, Darren Jarvis went over his case and came up with something he thought had been overlooked at trial. He got the original crash investigator to have another look at his tyre marks before the crash. Jarvis was convinced they would show he couldn't have been fighting with the wheel.
Surely, if the front wheels would do a left and right like this, if you're fighting with the wheel, the marks on the road indicate constant straight throughout. So that would have shown different marks on the front wheels rotating left to right if fighting with the wheel like this.
If this was true, and he wasn't fighting with the wheel, it may prove he was having a fit at the time and was not conscious before the accident. The new report seemed to confirm his theory.
In my opinion, there is no evidence of steering being applied whilst the vehicle was crossing back. It obviously contradicts the witnesses.
It is down to Michael Woolkine to convince the judges that this new evidence changes everything.
The eyewitnesses could have been contradicted very effectively, very importantly, completing the defence that this was a man who wasn't live and conscious.
But the police crash expert also reviewed the tyre marks. He found 2 other points where there was evidence that someone had steered the car.
The car left the carriageway there, and it's mounted the verge, and then it started to rotate. Based on my report, the pictures that were taken at scene showed that there was steering being applied, and that was agreed by all 3 experts.
If Darren Jarvis did steer the car, it suggests his fit happened after he had crashed, not before.
2 points at which the agreed experts say there was steering.
Michael Woolkine finds himself on the back foot with the judges.
My lord, yes, but there is no more on that 3rd and final stage of the passage to impact.
Mr. Woolkine, the jury was not just considering that period in time. At the end, the agreed findings show that there were steering inputs being made by your client.
The judges side with the prosecution and throw out Darren Jarvis's case.
We have considered the matter on the merits and rejected the applicant's case.
It's been disappointing. Have a seat.
Well, you say it's disappointing, but I've got closure now that I believe.
Really?
Yeah, I do.
Despite losing the case, Darren Jarvis still thinks his appeal was worthwhile. In his mind, the evidence presented does prove his innocence, even though the judges firmly disagreed.
I know that I would have done a lot more than one left or one right if I was conscious.
Do you know, I never thought in advance how you'd be if we lost.
I believe that I've got closure. I've won for myself then. Do you know what I mean? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Cheers.
For factory worker Joanna, who could not afford to be there for the hearing, there is a real sense of relief.
I feel happy that everything is finally over and we can not forget about this, but at least not think too much.
Joanna can now put the case behind her, but she does want her children to have fond memories of their father.
What do you remember about Daddy?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Nothing at all.
Well, I wanted to remember, so, you know, fantastic dad. The dad who was always there for them when they need it. We will try to move on. It's not going to be easy, but, well, the life has to go on.
At the Court of Appeal in London, Micaiah McDermott's family are hoping his killer's sentence will be increased by the court.
In our submission, this case does warrant the maximum sentence.
And the agonising wait of two mothers in Liverpool is nearly over.
Court rise.
In March 2017, Joshua Dobbie was driving a stolen car being chased by police. He crashed, killing 10-year-old Micaiah McDermott and his aunt Roseanne Cooper. Micaiah's mum had strong views on how the law should have treated her son's killer.
He should be considered a murderer and that he should receive a life sentence.
Yeah, I agree with you. The last time I saw my son was lying on a pavement with blood coming from his nose.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
Joshua Dobbie was charged with manslaughter, not murder, as there wasn't sufficient evidence he intended to kill. But his driving went beyond dangerous.
His driving was truly, subjectively reckless as to the risk of death.
This isn't a case, though, is it, of deliberately driving at the victims who sadly, ultimately die?
Well, there is a view about that, I know, from the witnesses who were present.
This is what we saw. It was the man's intention to do what he did. So the word accident, it wasn't an accident.
Joshua Dobbie pleaded guilty to manslaughter, and the trial judge sentenced him to serve 12 years in prison. The family has been told that in 8 years, he could walk free.
The realisation that this man would only spend 8 years in prison, I just felt so let down, so bitterly disappointed. You know, you go through life thinking that we've got the best justice system in the world, and you remain that way until you actually get involved with it.
It was Micaiah's sister Yayla's letter to the Prime Minister that led to this appeal.
I would still say he should serve a life in prison for Micaiah and a life in prison for Rosie, because he's still, whether he meant it or not, he still took 2 innocent people's lives, and there's no excuse for that.
The family has been called back to court because the judges are ready to deliver their verdict.
All rise.
They're shown to the private victims' room at the Court of Appeal.
Well, I hope is the sentence is increased, that it's going to be a life sentence and it's going to be at least 18 years in prison.
Yeah, an increase by a lot. I'm only going to be happy if it's increased a lot.
The wait is nearly over. After months of fighting for an increased sentence, the family are now about to hear the final verdict.
What this court has to ask itself is whether or not the sentence arrived at was unduly lenient. And given all the circumstances, we are not able to conclude that this was an unduly lenient sentence. We dismiss this appeal.
The judges decide that the sentence was within the guidelines and should not be increased. It's another devastating blow for Micaiah and Rose's family.
You heard Lord Justice Davis say that this court cannot interfere unless they consider that the sentences were totally unduly lenient, and they decided they weren't unduly lenient.
12 years for killing 2 people and destroying my other daughter's life. That's the value they've put on them 3 people's lives. Yeah, 12 years.
And at the end of 8 years, he would have served his sentence, he'd be out.
So I just really want to raise our glass to the great British justice system. They've really served us well. Would we all agree?
But it goes further than that.
We've got served life sentence now. That's never going to go away.
Can I say that I am very sorry indeed for your deep loss.
Micaiah's family have gone to visit his grave for his 11th birthday.
So that's Micaiah, he's there, and then that's Rosie right next to him. We wanted them together. I'd never have thought that you'd be standing here looking at this. It's not the way it should have been.
I show Mum as much love as I can to try and make up for the love that she would get from Micaiah and Rosie. But I think what Mum really just needs is her family back, how it used to be, and she's not going to get that. Love you guys. Love you guys.
In Liverpool, another mum is anxiously awaiting a verdict around the death of her son.
Justice was done for Sean, but not now, with the appeals going through.
3 years after Sean McHugh was stabbed and 5 teenagers convicted of his murder, his family is still coming to terms with their loss.
The night you killed Sean, you might have just killed me, because I'm dead inside. He was the baby, and he would have been 23 this year.
Sean's friends have come to the scene of his murder on what would have been his 23rd birthday.
Let's get them ripped out so everyone can see them.
We're here to celebrate it with them, aren't we? So, this is where we was last alive, do you know what I mean? It's in our thoughts and our hearts every single day.
I seen Sean's mum maybe a week or 2 weeks ago. We both looked at one another, crossed over. In my mind, she slowed down and I just walked fast. It was just that difficult being that close.
The judges are ready to deliver their verdict on Joseph McGill's conviction for murder.
We accept he'd done wrong that day, but he still didn't murder anybody.
Even if he hasn't used the knife, he still took part in it.
If the Court of Appeal were to quash the conviction of murder and substitute a conviction for manslaughter, it would probably mean that he would be released in the foreseeable future.
All rise.
After months of waiting and years of fighting on both sides, the verdict is delivered in a matter of seconds.
For the reasons given in the judgment handed down today, the applications for leave to appeal against sentence and conviction are refused. Thank you.
Court rise.
Joseph McGill's attempt to appeal his conviction has failed. As the judges ruled the original verdict was reached correctly, he will serve out a life sentence with a minimum of 9 years in prison. His mother has been waiting by the phone to hear the news from their lawyer, Shawneen.
Hello?
Hey, Carmel.
I've just come out.
Yeah?
It's all bad news, I'm afraid.
Okay.
They turned us down on everything.
They've basically not accepted any of the grounds of appeal. I'm so sorry, Carmel.
So how was Joseph?
He is disappointed.
Of course he's disappointed. I think he is, slightly dreading going back on the wing, and he's going to be okay. I know he's going to be okay.
And it's a massive blow.
It's a massive blow, but he is coming home, at some stage.
Do you know what I mean? And he's just got to focus on that.
I don't know what to say.
That's the end of the domestic remedies in the court here, so there's no more courts that he can go to in the UK. So it's probably the end of the line.
I think it's definitely a miscarriage of justice what they've done with Joseph. He's not guilty of murder. They should have overturned it.
Just a few streets away, the news is received very differently.
That they were going to win the appeal and we were going to come out. They deserve where they are today and to stay there. Well, I know I'll never see them for years, will I? I've got no chance of walking on the streets and bumping into them. Because that was my fear. You'll never get peace. I'm just glad they're not coming out. And I do believe in justice now.